imagine right now they did this to an imam. They did this to a Muslim leader. Do you think they'd get away with it? Do you think they'd get away with it? No, they would not get away with it. But because our Christians are so passive and so pathetic, we're so docile and they've just rolled over us for so many years. We're so apathetic. We don't care. We're not going to do anything. We're not going to stand for each other. Oh well, I disagree with him about this and this and this. Well, I don't agree with that guy fully on this. Well, this is how they're getting away with it, and eventually they're going to come after you too.
Well, welcome to the show today, folks. We have a very special guest. Many of you, our listeners, are familiar with Artur Pawlowski and his situation in Canada. He was on a previous podcast episode. Very powerful. A lot of comments, a lot of views on that. So you may know Nathaniel, our guest today, was the star baby. The doctors called him. I don't think he was expected to live, but I saw him give such a powerful, emotional speech to the European Parliament. I reached out to his dad, Arthur, and I said, "Man, Arthur, I've got to be able to talk to Nathaniel. I want to get his opinion on some things." And turns out Nathaniel's in a little bit of trouble with the law as well. So I guess it runs in the family. But Nathaniel, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So the speech, wow, man, what a speech. You just nailed it. What led up to that? What was the impetus for you to even be at the European Parliament? I mean, was this something you sought out, or you wanted to speak to them because of the situation in Canada? How did that come about?
Well, because of the situation that my dad's in with his upcoming sentencing, some people that are sympathetic reached out and they actually invited my dad to come speak at European Parliament in person because there was this citizens initiative going on. A bunch of members of European Parliament were putting on the citizens initiative. It was actually regarding like health, global health policy with the World Health Organization and these global entities that are pushing themselves onto sovereign nations. Many European politicians actually do not want that. But they also wanted a perspective of an outsider, a Canadian, and specifically they wanted my dad to come. But because of his conditions and his house arrest situation and his upcoming sentencing, he couldn't come, so I went in his stead. And well, we actually both got to speak because I got to speak in person, but they also got to play a video my dad filmed and they played it at the European Parliament. So both of us actually ended up being able to speak. And yeah, it was really incredible. It was just an awesome opportunity because I saw for the first time in a long time politicians that would actually stand for the people, for the right side. We don't have that in Canada. We don't have any representation for people that are just trying to live their lives, exercise their rights, be vocal Christians. Like we don't have that. No politician in Canada is willing to protect us and stand up for us. But members of European Parliament are. There was amazing European politicians there that were publicly saying, you know, we stand for you. Thank you for what you're doing. You're an inspiration. So it was really, really heartwarming to see that there's actual politicians on a global stage that are standing up for Canadians, for my family, and for the situation that's going on.
It looked like after you finished speaking, and then they did the video of your father, since he was under house arrest, and he was under house arrest when we had him on the show as well. But it looked like they responded very positively. I think, it was 30 seconds or a minute. I mean, you couldn't talk because they were all clapping.
Yeah, yeah, we had a standing ovation after the video they played of my dad. Members of European Parliament were crying. The whole room was very emotional. Um, it was one of the most popular speeches, surprisingly, because there was incredible people there that day speaking as well, and it just really resonated with people, which just shows like how far Canada has gone as a country. That people in Europe are starting to notice and just really support us because we need help in Canada. We need liberation. Like I don't know how else to say it. We need help. We are under tyrannical government regime. And if you follow the party line, your life will be fine. Like you'll live your life comfortably. You pay your 50% taxes, you're fine, right? But as soon as you stick your nose out and you try to be vocal, you try to talk about evil things that are going on. You try to talk about different sins that are going on. You try to talk about abortion, the LGBT stuff. You try to talk about anything like that. You talk about the COVID tyranny, anything like that. You mention that a little bit, and the government comes cracking down on you. You saw how truckers' bank accounts were seized. You saw how pastors were arrested for keeping their churches open. You saw how pastors were arrested for feeding the homeless, for exposing the homeless crisis in Canada. You've seen all this stuff, and people are finally starting to notice, I believe, and be sympathetic to our cause, because like, how far are we going to go? I've been reminded by several Eastern European people, especially people from Bosnia and Czech and Croatia, other places, that similar things like this happened in history, where pastors were arrested. They were the front runners, and then what happened next was a complete crackdown on the rest of the population, which is what I've been saying. That's what I said in European Parliament. That's what my dad's been saying. If they can do this to a pastor, if they can do this to a clergyman, what can they do to the rest of us? Right? There, even in Canada, we, in our criminal code, we have protections for pastors. We have protections for religious leaders. They're supposed to be revered, respected, right? Canada, the United States, we were built on Judeo-Christian values. Clergy was respected. They were supposed to be protected. That was a duty, right? They were like frontline services. They were considered that. And we even have in our criminal code sections that protect pastors. And if you can do this to a pastor, well, then what can they do to the rest of us? So it's just like, it's the tip of the spear, kind of. That's what the treatment of pastors is. It's showing what's going to happen down the line to the rest of us. If they do this to a pastor, they'll do this to all of us.
Yeah, I think the silence is, when we're silent like that, there's Eric Metaxas wrote a book. It's called A Letter to the American Church. And he compared what's happening and what happened in Germany with the church, with the pastors, with the silence, with the, they, at one point in time, his theme really is that they had the ability to stop Hitler. They held the power, but because they remained silent, and little by little, the freedoms began to be taken away. And that's what I see here in the States and in Canada and parts of Europe as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it fascinates me, because if they do this, like, as Christians, especially, as Americans, also as Canadians, but as Christians specifically, when they do this to one of us, that means they're doing this to all of us. I don't care what your denomination is. I don't care what you believe in. Like these minute, stupid details that we sometimes bicker about and split churches about. Like, it's not important. We're not at that point in history anymore. It's, do you believe in Jesus? We're gonna hack your head off. Like, it's my uncle has this saying, like, the sword of the Taliban doesn't discriminate, right? If it's not, they're not going to ask you, are you a Baptist or are you a Pentecostal? No, they'll just cut your head off. And that's kind of what we're going on in Canada. Like, it doesn't matter what your denomination is. You're a Christian, you're vocal. Okay, well, then we're going to come after you, and we're going to full force court systems, jail time, persecution, levels like you see in North Korea and China. That's what they're doing here in Canada. And as Christians, we're supposed to stand for each other. If they do this to one of us, they're doing this to all of us. And imagine right now they did this to an imam. They did this to a Muslim leader. Do you think they'd get away with it? Do you think they'd get away with it? No, they would not get away with it. But because our Christians are so passive and so pathetic, we're so docile, and they've just rolled over us for so many years. We're so apathetic. We don't care. We're not going to do anything. We're not going to stand for each other. Oh, well, I disagree with him about this and this and this. Well, I don't agree with that guy fully on this. Well, this is how they're getting away with it, and eventually they're going to come after you too. So right now is the time where we have to unify. We have to stand together. I don't care what your denomination is or what you believe. You're a Christian. you believe for, or maybe you're not even a Christian. You believe in religious liberty. You believe in the Constitution. You believe in rights and freedoms. Stand together when they do this to one of us, or they're going to end up doing it to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a slippery slope. And your point about the Muslims is just spot on. I've been saying that for years. You know, there's pockets of them in the United States. So we just finished Pride Month here. Okay, you know, they don't get a day; they get a whole month to celebrate their sin. So, but there's pockets of them in Michigan where the Muslims now are on the city council, they're on the school board. Do you think for 1 minute that they're allowing the pride flag out in the streets in their city? Not for a second. Do you think they're allowing that type of drag queen story hour to go on in their schools? Not for a minute. And boy, that's just, you're spot on right there.
Yeah, I mean, they stand for what they believe in. We don't. We're just we're just so passive. It's honestly sad where we've gotten to as Christians, because we're letting everything happen. In Canada, we don't have Pride Month anymore. We have Pride Season. So we have Pride Season now. So a day wasn't enough, a week wasn't enough, a month wasn't enough. Now it's season. So soon it's going to be the whole year. It's just going to be Pride year. That's what they're getting at, I guess. And on Parliament Hill, they raised the pride flag on Canada Day. That's like your July 4th. That they To do that is an act of treason. Actually, it's against the law. And yet they did it because there's no repercussions to them. There's no backlash. There's no one standing up against them. We're just letting this happen as the church, as conservatives, as free Canadians, as free Americans. We're just letting this happen. We don't want to rock the boat. We want to live our comfortable lives. We don't want to stick our nose out too much. So we just let all this stuff happening, and we've lost our nations. We're losing our kids now. They are indoctrinating them. In my generation, I read an interesting statistic. In older generations, the amount of people that self-identified as LGBTQ are like a staggering minute percentage. I don't remember right now, but it's like point zero something. And in my generation, Generation Z, it is now 25% self-identify as LGBT. So 1 in 4 of us self-identify as LGBT. Do you think that's because we're actually LGBT? No, it's because it's being pushed and forced on us on every corner. We're teaching little kids to do this stuff, and that it's okay, and we're confusing them and mind controlling them basically with this depravity and this gender ideology. So we're at a very dangerous point. If you know anything about history, it's a now or never situation. If we don't start to reverse this now, it ends it ends in tragedy. As a Polish man, I can say that. As someone who knows history, it's now we stand up against this, or it's going to end in a lot of bloodshed.
Hmm. Couldn't agree with you more. I noticed a couple of days after I had the interview with your father that Franklin Graham showed up, and I kind of wanted to see, I know he was trying to say the same things, shine a light on what's going on with the Canadian government, the persecution that the church is enduring, highlighting your father as just, a freedom fighter, and to stand up, warning us in the U.S. as well. Did anybody pay any attention to that, or was it just me?
Yeah, I mean, he has a huge following,
Yeah.
which is great, because when you have people with a great following that can kind of like unify us Christians a little bit, kind of say like, hey, we may not agree on everything. We might have some disagreements on some things, but we can at least agree on the essentials, and unify on this issue that, you know, let's agree on the gospel, right? We all agree, okay, how what's like salvation, right? We can agree on the gospel, repent, believe in Jesus, put your faith in him, right? And then we can agree, agree to disagree on the other minute stuff that aren't super important for the time being now. And we can focus on fighting, because right now we are in a fight. We're in a fight to the death. If you don't believe me, well, look what they're doing to my father. They want to put him away for up to 10 years in prison for giving a sermon to the truckers that referenced the solidarity movement, which was a peaceful resistance against the government. The judge said, if you even reference the solidarity movement, the prosecutor said, if you even reference the solidarity movement, well, that's an act of mischief against the government. Well, that's such an arbitrary charge. Mischief, what does that mean? Well, that just means you disagree. It's a thought crime. You disagreed with the government and you're inciting mischief. So it's they're controlling who we agree with and who we align with. So if you don't align with the government, you don't agree with the government, well, then you're going to be found guilty of crimes. They're going to find you guilty and put you in prison. And that is Orwellian. That is 1984. Like this is, we're at a very dangerous part in history. So I'm very glad when all sorts of Christians can come together and just show support for Canada and other people that are being persecuted by governments around the world. I know in the United States, there's many pastors that are being persecuted, that are being sent to prison, that are being charged and harassed, and the FBI has gone mad. Like, we have to unify and stand up against this. Like, say what you want about Muslims, but at least they unify. At
Yeah.
least they can stand against, and you don't see denominations of Muslims. There's just Muslims, right? And they stand for what they believe in, and they will not let the government or anyone roll over them. Why can't we be like that to an extent as Christians?
Yeah, it was complete silence with the LGBTQ. They keep adding letters in the Michigan city. Not one of them marched down the streets with their half nakedness or full nakedness, having their little parade there. They didn't tolerate it for a minute. So yeah, in your speech, you said that Canada has fallen, and you called out Trudeau. You called Trudeau Caligula. Maybe comment
Yes.
on that.
Yeah, well, Canada has fallen. Canada has fallen because you see what the Canadian government got away with. We had the Emergency Act invocation, which was martial law invocated on Canadians, on peaceful Canadians, truckers. We had them trampled with horses. We saw them beaten with batons. Why? Because they disagreed with the Trudeau government. They disagreed with vaccine mandates. They disagreed with tyranny and stripping away our rights and freedoms. And they got away with that. That went to court, and the court says, yeah, no, it was justified. It was completely justified to go trample grandmas with horses because they wanted to live their lives in peace, right? So we have fallen. The government is getting away with literally everything that they did. Every literal murder. They are getting away with murder. So Canada has fallen as a country. We need help. Like we honestly need help as a country. And I call Trudeau a Caligula because I see remarkable resemblances between him and Caligula. Caligula he was the third Roman emperor. He got into power. First 6 months, everyone loved him. He gave the people exactly what they wanted, kind of like what Trudeau did. He gave the people exactly what they wanted. He legalized their weed. He gave tax, exemption stuff, and he gave lots of money to families. And, great stuff for the Canadian mind, right? I still believe complete depravity, but that's what the people wanted. They wanted the depravity, so Trudeau gave them into that depravity. And then the mad emperor stuff started to happen, and he really lost his mind. He started to become paranoid. He started to trample grandmas with horses, just do absolutely despicable stuff. I was reading and watching a documentary on Caligula, and Trudeau, I believe he resembles him the most. He's been called Castro's son. He's been compared to Mussolini and Hitler and all this stuff, but I believe he's a Caligula. But also we know that not too long after we had a Roman emperor called Nero, and we know how that was for Christians. So I'm even more worried who follows this Caligula. Is it going to be Nero? Is it good? Like, we need a complete reformation of our government. We need these people out. We need to set an example. They need to be punished. They need to, so that something like this never happens again. A Nuremberg like number two. Nuremberg 2.0, so that nobody can ever do this again. And in Canada, they're just getting away with everything.
What can the European Parliament do to help? You gave a great speech. what can they do to help? Or
even giving a platform to the issue that just raised awareness. Millions of people got to see and hear the story of what's going on, right? So Europeans got to hear it. Maybe Europeans weren't aware of it, but now they heard in their very own parliament that this is happening to Canadians. Around the world, people got to hear it. That is helping. That is helping because people can look at other ways to get involved. When my dad was in prison, Americans helped the most. And what they did is they wrote emails, letters, phone calls, texts, and they flooded the system of the politicians, police, prison, all the people responsible for persecuting my dad. And I believe that was fundamental in getting him out of prison because it just flooded their system, and it was annoying. It was really annoying to them, and just that political pressure was really great. So any kind of exposure of this helps. And members of European Parliament who make statements, I did a couple of interviews with a few of them. They made statements like, we stand with your family. What they're doing to pastors, what they're doing in Canada is evil. And that makes a statement because it sends a message to our politicians that other politicians are watching them and they disagree. They disagree with the treatment of pastors.
yeah, that's really good. Yeah. So I think the state wants the church, but I think the Trudeau government or the whichever country you want to pick, they want the church to just parrot the party line. They don't mind if the church exists, but go along with what we're saying. The same way is going back again to Germany, the national church there. I'm sure they have no problem whatsoever with any of the pastors that have, LGBT approved agendas that go along with, they may have a drag queen story hour in their churches like they do in the States. Those churches they're just an extension of the government and the oppression that's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. You have churches like the United Church. They fly pride flags. I don't know if you have that church in the States, but the United Church, they fly pride flags. Certain Lutheran sects also fly the pride flag. The Anglican Church officially flies the pride flag. And I believe the Anglican Church is the one that said drag is holy. Drag is actually okay. That's completely fine. Some heathen decided to compare God to a drag queen. Like, these are abominations. I would fear for my life to make statements like that, because it says in the Bible, God will not be mocked. And you have stories like with Elijah, where kids were making fun of him, and what happened? Bears ate them and tore them to pieces. God will only be mocked to a certain point, and when you go past that line, God does not mess around. So I believe we're in a period where he's given us into a delusion, right? It talks about that in Romans, where God gave us into our depravity. And I believe we're at that point where God gave us into our depravity because we rejected God for so long. The United States and Canada made a covenant with God when these countries were founded. And we have broken that covenant and completely walked away. Well, then, okay, God said, okay, fine. I'm going to give you to your evil ways. Enjoy it for a time. And what I believe, not too long ago, 3 years ago, I believe judgment started. We started to be judged by our own hands, actually. I didn't see that coming, but our own hands, our own governments, our own politicians started. God used them to judge us. You had complete insanity, right? COVID stuff, the big lies and stuff, and I believe God was judging the world, and He's making everyone make a choice. He's forcing everyone to make a choice. Either you align with God or you align with the world. There's no middle ground. There's no walking the fence. You make a choice. And I believe that happened during COVID. Everyone was sort of forced to make a choice. And it was really interesting to see that play out, because I mean, how many friends did you lose? How many friends everyone was sort of forced to split, because you had to either go right or go left. And so I believe we're still in that period where we're being judged, but what follows judgment is wrath. And that is something that is not fun, judgment falls on the just and the unjust. And I believe wrath will come, because how long will God allow us, especially as a church, to walk in this stuff and to just spit in his face? And we're telling God we know better. Like, yeah, we read the Bible and we believe in you, but yeah, these sins are okay. We're gonna parade our sin. We're actually gonna support them as the church, and we're just gonna walk in this evil because we know better. We know better than you, God. So, we don't believe this is sin. We like this stuff. We're attached to it, so we're just gonna walk in it. Well, God's not gonna allow that to happen for much longer.
Yeah, I think, like the book of Hosea, the story of Hosea and Gomer's wife, and God, they broke covenant with God. God gave them a divorce. It's we're down that path. We've passed that point, as you said, with what's going on in Canada and in the States when they start flying, and as Isaiah says, they're calling evil good and good evil. You know, um, to think that a pastor would go to jail for a sermon he gave to, or for feeding homeless people, it's just, you have to scratch your head. And the States, people point, is just kind of another marker when you have someone on the Supreme Court who says before the whole world, I'm not sure, I don't know what a woman is. I mean, don't know the difference between a man and a woman. I mean, Romans 1, brother.
Yeah, yeah. Mark 10:6. It's very simple. God created the male and female. Uh, but right now they're just warping definitions because they need to erode everything that made America America. All of our fundamental values, our core values, family. They have to erode that if they want cultural Marxism to erode to arise out of the ashes. They have to completely degenerate us, demoralize us, desensitize us to everything. And they've done a very good job because we can't even agree on what a woman is. And if we can't agree on what a woman is, how are we supposed to agree that the government is evil and we need them gone? We need to completely reform the system. They have done it's a genius job. Um, and I believe we learned about this in 1985 when KGB defector, I believe his name was Bezmenov. He came out. He was an ex-KGB defector, and he said how he explained to the world how the Soviet Union was going to take over the United States. He says, "We're not going to even fire a bullet. We're going to infiltrate you culturally. We're going to go in and just completely desensitize you, demoralize you, take away all your values, and then we're going to plant seeds, and those seeds will grow and Marxism will arise, and that's how the communist ideology is going to infiltrate the states." And that's exactly what they did, and that's exactly what's happening. And communism is alive and well in Canada. We're basically a full communist country now. We're very dangerously close to communism. Anyone from Eastern Europe is pretty credible in telling you this is communism. And Eastern Europeans are screaming in Canada, in the United States, these are the signs. And you're just not listening. Americans are not listening. Canadians are not listening. And I do believe the church has the power to overturn this. If enough people, right? If enough people humble themselves, call on God's name, well, then God will hear their prayers. I believe God's not hearing our prayers because we're not humble. We are pride. We are so proud. We are parading ourselves and shaking our fists to God in our pride. Well, if God says he opposes the proud. Why would he ever fix our countries? We're praying to God, come fix our country. But he's saying, why would I do that? You are an evil, wicked nation. You murder the unborn. You walk in depravity. You hurt little children. You saw that. I'm sure you heard of the movie that just came out, Sound of Freedom, right? This is a global issue it's going to overtake the drug industry. And why on earth would God hear our prayers? Enough of us have to understand that we have walked so far and we have to repent, and we have to come and humble ourselves before God, because this has just gone so far.
Man, that's so good, Nathaniel. I've heard an evangelist say, he says, God does not answer prayers. God answers desperate prayers. And I think that's the situation we're at now, is the times that we're living in. People need to be desperate. They need to take a stand. They need to make it known to their politicians, to their church leaders. They need to call, if their church leaders are going down this path of a woke church and following the ideology of the Marxists, they need to call them out. And if they don't repent, maybe go to a different church that is teaching the scriptures. But yeah, those two things, I think it was called the Naked Communist or the Communist Manifesto. But the two of the points in that were control the school system and control the churches. And you can dismantle, the hierarchy. You can dismantle the structure. You can replace authority. You can blur those lines so much that, now it's all under the guise, well, we're just trying to help you, Nathaniel.
Yeah.
We're trying to help you. Yeah. The Bible becomes, hate speech. You cannot say certain things. You better walk on eggshells. You better be quiet or I'm coming for you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And they're saying this is all for our health and safety. And they're taking away all our rights and freedoms. And you're absolutely right that the church was always historically the forerunners of defending freedom, liberty, and fighting for the innocent. And now they've completely made the church docile and irrelevant. And so after they got the churches out of the way, they went after the children. And how do they go after the children? Well, Lenin said, give me 4 years and I'll plant a seed so deep in the minds of the children, it'll never be uprooted. And that's what they're doing now. So they've gone after the children, they've gone after the churches. And right now it's that remnant. It's up to that remnant church to fight back against this, stand up against it. If enough people had said, no, we're not going to comply. No, we're not going to do this. We're going to stand up against this. They wouldn't have been able to do this. They wouldn't have had a chance. They can't. In Eastern Europe, there was 50,000 communists ruling over 35 million Polish people. And when they finally realized, wait, there's a lot more than us, and yeah, some of us might get shot, some of us might go to prison. That's a real risk, and many people were not willing to take that risk. That is a risk. I understand that. But enough Polish people finally took it to the streets and said, okay, we're going to peacefully resist and we're not going to let this happen. And they dismantled the system. They completely shut down the communist system, and the 50,000 bureaucrats working for the Communist Party could not control 36 million Polish people. Not enough tanks. There's not enough soldiers. There's not enough bullets. You can't do it. So if enough Christians, like, I don't know what the statistics are in the United States, how many so-called Christians there are, but there's a lot. There's a lot. It's staggering amount of Christians, and there's not enough FBI agents to go after all of you. So if you're a Christian and you see other Christians going to jail for standing against the LGBT or standing against COVID mandates or standing against any other tyrannical thing that is unconstitutional, that actually is an act of treason in your country, because that's what they're doing. I was even listening to Robert Kennedy. He said what the CIA is doing is treason. They are completely breaking the law. And I don't understand how a nation that went to war over a tea tax has let their tax-funded dollars go to mutilating children. Blows my mind that, because like Canadians, we never had a war. We never had any sort of conflict on our own soil. We don't know anything. We don't know any better. We sort of have an excuse, but at least we had the truck convoy. We had farmers and regular people that stood up against this. I didn't see much of that in the States. For a nation that's like so red blooded and fighting and an amazing Christian nation, you have the most missionaries on earth. You do the most charity work. You're like you were the most amazing country in the world not so long ago, and now you're letting your tax dollars go to mutilating children where you went to war over a tea tax. It blows my mind that you Americans have let this go so far.
Yeah, I was so surprised at the number of churches. I mean, I'm in Texas. I mean, brother, everybody in Texas has a guns and, freedom and, don't mess with Texas, the logo, the slogan. But I was just shocked at the number of churches that just rolled over and just shut down. And, I heard Romans 13 so many times. I didn't know it was in the Bible that often. I thought, my gosh, what a misinterpretation of that. But to me, as I look back on this and see what I saw what happened, to me, it was kind of a trial run. It was like, okay, let's just see how far we can push this. How complicit will the church be? How complicit will people be? Will they just roll over? Or will they say, no, like you quoted the statistics there in Poland? Well, they say, I'm not. And you saw the hypocrisy. You would have churches shut down, but yet a man could go to a strip club where they're drinking beer, smoking, and watch girls take their clothes off. Now that was an essential service, Nathaniel, but the church is not essential. Okay. So, but yeah, it was just, you just had to shake my head and go, wow, if we fall this easily, for this mess, what's next? Are they going to shut us down for climate change or what's the next, pandemic that they cook up, and all of the time you saw the politicians, they would get caught on camera or something and none of them were wearing masks. They were all gallivanting around, flying around their jets, going on vacations to the Bahamas. And, you thought, this is for them and this is for us, you bend over, you get your shot, you get your booster, you get booster 2, you get booster 3, so yeah, I was a little bit surprised. I know there were a few churches there in Canada that stood up to it, but for the most part, I think they were pretty complicit and just followed the rules, whatever they spit out, right?
Oh yeah, 99% did. And unfortunately, we found out that they also got money. So the churches that shut down, they got money incentives from the government. So you understand what their God is. They don't serve God, they serve money, they serve the wallets. But what angered me most was that after the mandates were gone, people went back to those churches. People went back to those pastors, right? And yeah, I understand there's a few of them that actually repented. They said, okay, what we did was wrong. I'm sorry. That's different. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the people that they stand by what they did. And that's 99% of the churches. They stand by the Zoom churches, the masking, the social distancing, the vaccine passport at the door. They did that. They did that to their own people. And people went back to them. That I do not understand why you would go back to people that betrayed you and treated you like that and who don't believe the Bible, because clearly they don't believe the Bible. Clearly they're not. I don't even believe they're saved if they did that to you. If they did that to you and they are that blinded and delusional and they have no faith whatsoever, why would you go back to them? I don't understand that as just as a human being why you would do that. But people like comfort, people like familiar, people like the shows, people like the big money, the mega churches. They like that stuff, so people went back. But those places are dead. I believe they're completely dead.
Yeah. People want in the States, they want a preacher in skinny jeans and some smoke machines and some big screens and a feel good 15, 20-minute sermonette, and we're in and out and get the next group in after that. And it's all regulated and just, bam, bam, bring them in, bring them out. Nobody wants to hear the doctrine of repentance. It's gotten to the point now. I mean, just sexuality. in the biblical approach to sexuality. You see a lot of pastors now that'll say, hey, I'm scared to preach about it because I know that in my congregation, maybe not the parents that are sitting there, but, maybe they have kids or that are gay or lesbian or that bent. And they feel like, oh, if I preach this sermon on a biblical approach to sexuality, I'm going to lose, I've heard, 10, 20, 30% of my congregation may walk away. And, again, I need that money, Nathaniel. We've got a big building to pay for. We've got salaries. We've got overhead. And so it's cost a lot of pastors to be more careful about their approach to the scriptures and how they speak out every Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. They're cowards. They care about money. That's all that matters to them, and they're not going to risk offending anyone to get canceled or anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are the charges against you?
Well, I broke the safety and inclusion bylaw, they called it. The mayor passed a bylaw where you're not allowed to protest within 100 meters of a drag event. I was preaching and reading the Bible within 100 meters, so I broke that bylaw according to them, and it's up to a year in prison, which is weird because it's a bylaw, so that it's a municipal bylaw. It has up to a year in prison, anywhere ranging from a small fine to a year in prison, for reading the Bible and preaching outside of a drag event within 100 meters. I was on public sidewalk outside of a public library where the event was going on, for ages 0 to 8 year olds, which I completely disagree with. There should not be public and also publicly funded. So taxpayers pay for drag queens to read to children that are 0 to 8 year olds. So I absolutely did not agree with that. So I was preaching the Bible outside, and there was also a group of Antifa counter protesters protesting me, and my friends who were also with me. They also got charged, and the Antifa people, they were protesting, and the bylaw says you're not allowed to protest outside of a drag event. So they were protesting, but they're not getting charged. So it's a completely discriminatory bylaw that was passed by the mayor, who's personally invested in it because her daughter is non-binary. So it's a personal vendetta, and she passed the bylaw very quickly, and like no constitutional awareness or anything like that. But anyone with half a brain can look at the bylaw, who understands the Canadian law, and can say this is so unconstitutional and discriminatory and just wrong. Like you can't prohibit protests outside of a drag event, but allow Antifa to protest you outside of a drag event. Like it just makes no sense. And I was also charged for bylaw harassment. So I don't know what that was for. The entire event was filmed from start to finish and posted on YouTube. So anyone who watches it can. I mean, maybe you can tell me where the harassment was, but I was reading the Bible and preaching, and if they consider that harassment, well, then guilty as charged. I was harassing everyone with the Bible and my preaching, but other than that, I didn't really engage with anyone, or yeah, I don't understand why they charged me with that. But today I was in court. I pleaded not guilty, and they'll be sending me the details of when court will be and all that stuff shortly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something. Well, I guess the Bible's just not inclusive enough, and it's filled with hate speech, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what they claim. In Canada, we also have certain laws where you're not allowed to read certain passages of the Bible because they involve sexual identity. So yeah, we're at a scary place in Canada.
Well, what can people do to help you, to help your father? What can Americans do?
Well, we're hiring a lawyer now because now I'm going to need it. And my dad's sentencing is August 9th. So prayers are definitely appreciated and needed. And if you want to help donate to the legal defense, then you can go to my dad's website. He's hiring a lawyer for myself and for several other people who were charged under the same offense. So that lawyer will be taking all the cases for that offense. As you know, lawyers aren't cheap. If you want to fight against the government, that's the punishment is the process. A lot of people say is just getting you through that. The average person just cannot do this alone. So yeah, prayers one. And if you want to donate, you can go to my dad's website, streetchurch.ca, streetchurch.ca, and you can donate there. All the funds that are donated will be going to the legal defense now.
Great. Anything you want to, I'll put those in the show notes. Is any parting words you want to leave us with?
Well, just thank you for having me. Thank you for showing support. What Americans did for my dad when he was in prison was incredible. I don't think Americans understand the impact that they had on Canadian politics, on Canadian justice system, on the way the police and the prison was treating my family. So what Americans do, and it really matters. It really matters. You guys still have a majority population. You still have the ability to get involved. So what you did is just, I want to thank you all, and yeah, keep it up because it was working. And that was last year. So a year went by, and now they're back at it. They want to punish my family again. They want to come after me now. They came after my father. Now they're coming after me. They're sentencing on August 9th. We don't know what's going to happen, if the judge wants to throw the book at him or what's going to happen. So, yeah.
Well, we'll certainly be in touch, and I will put the links, Street Church as well, in the show notes. But I just want to thank you for your time. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. Man, wisdom, you've got some wisdom, brother, way beyond your years, and what you're seeing spiritually. It's just an anointing from God.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me too.